Hey everyone, Yasin here, and in this tutorial I'm going to cover how to choose colors that go well together. Now I've already covered this in the past, but I think a lot of people have missed some of those videos, and I'm still seeing a lot of students asking me questions that involve things like, how do you choose colors that work well together? And how do you add shadows? Like, how dark should the shadows be? And so I figured what I'm going to do is just take you through how I would color an image and talk about my thought process. And then in a separate video, I'll cover how to shade in terms of, knowing how light or how dark a color is and how to shift to a warm color and stuff like that. So for this one, to begin with, it's very ugly, and that's on purpose. I hope you think this is ugly, because that was my intention. It's supposed to sort of burn your eyes. And let's take it from there. So what's the first thing I do if I have an image? Well, and what problems does this have? Because right now, what I see with this is it's too colorful. Like, there's too much saturation, and it's overwhelming. And that's not good. You don't want that much, or at least I don't think so. So yeah, just to add a disclaimer, everything I say now is going to be my opinion, what I think is better. And so, you may not agree, but as to that, I can't really comment. Okay, so first thing I want to do is establish what my palette is and also change the background. So to begin with, let's see. Well, first of all of these are very saturated. So they're all like middle values and they're all super saturated. So I hit Control U to go into my hue saturation sliders, and I'm just scrolling, and I'm going to take the saturation down. So already that's helping. Now, the other thing is you have to think about the value. So what's going to make this character pop? This is sort of, if you look in the thumbnail, it's sort of close to all the colors. So it's like, might not be the best choice. I usually go either a bit dark or a bit light, lighter than the character anyway. So I guess in this case, well, we can always change it, but let's start with something a bit lighter and less saturated. And scroll through. I usually go for something neutral with the thought that I will change this possibly in the future. So let's just pick something like this. Okay. So now the next thing I want to ask myself is, what is the dominant color in this? And you only really want to choose one color to be dominant, and then have other colors around that. So for instance, let's say I chose green, because right now it's pretty green, and I had green as the dominant color. Okay, so now, I don't know if you've seen my other tutorial, how to choose colors that work, but if not, I'm just going to go through some of what that tutorial was about. So basically, the first thing is this. You have a dominant color, like, for instance, green. Now, on this color wheel, and I'm going to be referring to this color wheel, and also I'll show you with this color picker what I'm talking about. So what's near green? Let's just look at this Photoshop color picker first, because it's a bit more ubiquitous than the color wheel. But what's close to green? Well, you have yellows and you have blues, and then the blues go into purples and then into reds. The yellows go into oranges and into reds. So what's close to green, well, first of all, you have green. So with green, I'm going to be able to be the most open with the colors I pick, right? So let's say I have a really saturated green, that's fine. But now I'm not going to have anything as saturated as this in my image. So what I'm going to do then is, if I go towards yellow, I'll think of it like this. I can have, because yellow is close to green, I can be saturated, but I'm going to stay a bit away from as saturated as I would be with green, right? So like something like this is fine, but I might not go, you know, completely like this. Okay, so something less saturated. This also works. I could also go the other direction and go towards blue, and it's going to be less saturated again than the greens. And this is still working. This is still in a harmony. And then I can go towards purples. But as I get towards purples, this is pretty far from green. So now I'm going to go less, like much less saturated than I would have. So again, so this is a purple. It looks fine in this context. But if I went super saturated like this, it's too strong. Like this, seeing this green and this purple, it's overpowering. So, and if I went to reds, I'd go quite desaturated. Maybe something like this. And it still reads as a red. Like, you're not going to be confused, like, oh, what color is this? It's just much, much less saturated than the green. And if we look in this color wheel, and I just pick this color, you can see how saturated it is. Pick the red, see how much more desaturated that is. And that's really, you know, the crux of it. It's what is your dominant color, and then you lose saturation as you go around. And for I don't know if I covered what saturation means, but basically it's how colorful the things are. Like this is very colorful, and then gray is like not colorful at all. So gray is desaturated, and then a neon color is, you know, the most saturated. So that's that. And when I pick the colors for the characters, I tend to go with that. Like let's pick, for instance, let's say the greens. Well, so I have in mind, okay, this is a green, but then I also think, what is it shifted towards? Like, is this a green shifted towards yellows, something like this? Or is this a green shifted towards blues, which is more like this? And I tend to go towards one or the other. So if it's green shifted towards yellows, I might have more yellows and oranges and reds, even though they're going to be desaturated reds. And if it's shifted towards blues, I'm going to have, you know, different kinds of blues and desaturated purples and stuff. So that's my scheme for picking a palette. So let's just try an attempt with this on this alien person. So, okay, the background's greenish already. So if this character is greenish, I might want her to pop off the background. How do you do that? Well, just don't make the background the same as the character. So what's the opposite of green? Well, it would be, in this case, it's more of a magenta. So let's go towards something that's more of a magenta. And maybe something like this. And again, because it's far away from the green, I'm going to desaturate it more. You can also use a very much more saturated color that's opposite from your main color as an accent, but you don't want to use that all over the place. So for instance, on her shirt right now, there's this green that's popping off the page because it's against this red, which is making it act as an accent. So let's take the saturation down. And the other thing that's really important is to make friends with saturation. Like, you do not need to pick colors that are this saturated, especially like this, like crazy saturated. You don't need to be this high in your saturation. In fact, most of your colors should be, or very well could be, in a much more desaturated area like this. Like that's a gray, that's a gray. And then this seems like, well, that's just gray. But if I switch to a warm version, now this seems a lot more green to this compared to this, which is more red-orange. And you have a lot of variation when it comes to grays. There's a lot of room to play with very subtle color shifts. Okay, so let's try coloring this character. Well, let's first make a palette. Okay, let's have one dominant green. And I don't want to go that saturated. Even though this is about greens, I'm going to move it to maybe somewhere around here. So something like this. And then let's go towards the blue. So we'll have a bit less saturation. And I can also go up and down in value. I'll talk about values a bit more later, but I'm just thinking about colors, right? So more of the blues, something like that, you know. You've got a lot of this area is what I'm looking at. And then I can also go more into yellows as well. And then I'm going to have an accent, which is going to be quite different. And maybe it's something like this. Now, you might ask, well, green is here. Why didn't you go all the way across? Well, the thing is, I don't need to go that far just because all these colors are very desaturated. So I don't need to make that big of a jump. So anyway, let's get this on the right layer. And let's just see how these colors work. So I'm gonna try filling with this for the skin, this for the accent, this for maybe the pants, this for, oh, that's too close. That's still pretty close. What I could do is go into yellow and raise the saturation a bit, but keep it like a greenish yellow, and something like that could work. And then for the eye, again, we could try something more yellow. And then to make this pop out, we can again go into something that's more like the accent color, and maybe even strengthen that a bit. And there we go. So that's a bit more of an interesting, but also quite subtle color. And then from these, like, you can do a lot. You could like keep these colors and put them in a different order, and they'll still look fine with each other. But it's more a case of like, notice how, you know, you have your green that's kind of saturated, but then the rest are pretty desaturated. And this is, I guess, other than this, which is the accent, which I put in the eye. So that's kind of how I think about things. It's working like that. Now, another thing is, if you have trouble with colors, or you want to make things very colorful, there is a way of doing that. Instead of having colors that are really, you know, garish like this, you might think like, well, but I want to have a very colorful image. That's fine. But what you have to do then is across the board, desaturate your colors. And you might be thinking like, but that's going to be not colorful, right? Well, no. What you want to do is desaturate your colors by bringing them towards white. So first of all, white and black they have no saturation, and gray has no saturation. So desaturating, you can go towards the left on this. In this case, you know, anything towards the left, you're getting desaturated. So going from green to white is getting desaturated. So this, for instance, is desaturated, but it's still very colorful. And as long as you stick to pastels, you're fine. You can actually use a lot of different colors and get the appearance of something looking very colorful, just because the reality is these are still desaturated colors. They're not crazy saturated, and you can have a lot of desaturated colors. Like, you remember what I was saying with the grays. You can have all sorts of grays and it's going to be fine. When you run into problems is when you get into these types of colors, you know, very intense colors. So using just a very pastel palette, what I can do is start filling it. So let's say the skin is this color, and the eyes, we already did that color, and the white of the eye might be this color, and then you've got this color, maybe this color. Yeah, nah, this for this, yeah, that's better, and this for this, and that's actually fine. Yeah, so let's just go with that. What else could we have done? That or that maybe? I mean, that all works. But this is fine. Maybe tone this purple down a bit. Something like that. And yeah, now this is getting lost, so I could just do that. So yeah, this works as well. And this is kind of what I like to use just because I like my stuff to look colorful. And it's like, fine, if you want to look colorful, it's you can go colorful, you just have to be lighter and stay away from these darks. So you can't get like a full value range or it's going to look a bit weird, because if I throw in something like this, it's now, or this, it's going to contrast too much. It's okay if you color your lines these colors, but if you know, if I just took this, for instance, and colored that, it's now like, well, that's quite a bit too much. So let's say I wanted the idea of this, like a dark bluish face. Well, okay, so if normal blue is this color and it's this light, right? In the color wheel, it's this bright. If I want to go darker, I can move it to like more of a purple, and I can go a bit darker and a bit more saturated like this, and it's still going to read as a dark blue. So you're looking at this, and compared to this, it's like, oh wow, you put down a dark blue. But we know from what we saw, like this is super light, right? So that's basically the gist of it is, you know, if you want to go, maybe I'm going to change this color of the eye just because it's exactly the same as this. It's like, yeah, that's okay, but maybe a little bit more saturated, something like that. No, I like that less. This? Sure. Just so there's a difference. Anyway, okay, so yeah, that's the gist of it. Like, if you want to pick colors that work well together, if you want to be colorful, go to town but keep everything super light. And if you want to be having a full value range, then pick a dominant color. And as you get away from that color, make sure you start to desaturate it, right? So you might want to pick a bright yellow, like that, and instead, and you want it to exist with a bright blue, choose one or the other. So you can have this yellow, fine, but then for this blue, desaturate it way down, and then have something like that, and that works. Or have this blue, and then go to the yellow, and then instead of it being like this, desaturate it, you know, to maybe something like this, and then that also works. Or something like that could work as well, because it'll read as a yellow, but you know, you don't want, like this with this is a bit too much. Now this is just, again, a disclaimer, this is just an idea of what to do. I'm not saying you must do this. This is not an absolute rule. It's just something to keep in mind. And really what it's for is people who don't have much of a method right now. Because I know for myself, when you're going in blind to something, when you have no clue at all, it can be really difficult. But even if you have a small idea, it's a lot more helpful. You know, if you have just a basic method, which it works, like I know I can color something and it's gonna look okay, that's a lot more comforting than the feeling of I don't know what I'm doing at all. So one thing I wanted to do just before the end is change the background color. And I don't know, I tend to stick with very desaturated colors, but that kind of gives off, I don't know, maybe my style a little bit. So you could go for colorful colors, and it's a case of what do you think pops out the most? What do you think does this justice? And also look at this and going into values. I'm just going to make a value checking layer. The way you do that is in Photoshop, just make a new layer and you can set it to saturation or color and just fill it with black or white or gray, anything that's desaturated, and you'll get the values there. So let's say I have the background and I want to use a color like this, right? I can also check the values, like, fine, what is that like against this character? And it's very close to the skin tone, so you're getting a lot less contrast than you might like. So you can adjust that. You don't even have to change the hue or the saturation, just change the lightness up or down until that looks good. So let's say I think that looks better. Okay, and then turn off the color layer, and now you have this and this character popping off, and that's fine. So in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about shadows and highlights and how you should figure out, like, well, okay, so I have this blue, what color should the shadow be? Or I have this yellow, what color should a highlight be? Okay, so I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.